What's going on, everybody? We live for another episode of the U-Turn radio show. I'm your host, Richard Taylor, and waiting on my guests to arrive. Hold on one quick moment. Let me share this video. This is going to be a different video. My guest is. What's going on, everybody? We live for another episode. Turn that off. But yeah, so this is going to be a different kind of episode. My guest is in Utah, and we were unable to get the stream to work for him. So we're going to do a call in. So he's going to be calling in. So give us, about a minute so we can start the show. I'm about to start the radio show. So in a few minutes, you'll hear the login, the login song, and then we're going to be right with you. So give us about 20 seconds. We're going to start the show. But I thank all of y'all for tuning in. And
8 and 12 across the country. For World, I'm Myrna Brown. For more sound journalism grounded in facts and biblical truth, visit WBISLP 1069, Winterville, Ayden, Grifton, Southside, Greenville, North Carolina.
I try to be a better man, but folks just don't understand. Trying to do all I can to deal with this addiction in me. Lord, I don't want to change. I can't stay the same. But the sins that in my vein is trying its best just to kill me.
And good evening. Good evening. Good evening. We are back. Welcome to another episode of the U-Turn radio show. I'm your host, Richard Taylor. We're coming live at 106.9 Awesome Radio, WBIS, here in Greenville, North Carolina. Also in Rocky Mount, WLYT 100.3. It's definitely a pleasure to be here again. If you have not been to our website, please go to our website, WBISAwesomeRadio.org, and download all of our apps on the Google Play, the Apple Store, and Alexa. Also, this is a call-in show. Let me put the number up there so you guys can call in. Tonight, we have a very interesting show with the interesting guest, Dink Bridgers, who is an author. He's also what I call him is an historian, because every time I talk about something, history related, especially around the Goldsboro area, he always has a deep introspective just wealth of information that he shares with me. I was looking through my messages today, and I was looking for his number. But when I was looking for the number, I just saw these long paragraphs of him telling me some information about certain things I might have posted or spoke about. So he's definitely an interesting man. We're going to hear some of his stories, some of his experiences. So he's going to call in. I told him to call in about 8:03, so we're going to be waiting on this call. But please, as you come in, let us know that you're here. Say, hey, what's up? I love to hear from everybody here. I thank God once again for allowing us to be here another week. I hope everybody enjoyed the Juneteenth holiday celebration, Unity Fest, cookouts, all those good things. I know I did. And so it's just definitely a blessing to be here in the land of the living. Every day you see people, passing away. People, making social media posts about the loss of a loved one. Just yesterday, I lost a good close friend of mine, Cleveland Levon Ward, aka Pookie. So I do want to keep him in remembrance today, as well as his family, his wife, and his children. He was a dear friend of mine who lost his life suddenly last year. And so, I get it. That their life is precious, so we must cherish the ones that are here while they're here. So on that note, I cherish this individual because once again he's what we would call an elder, but he has such once again such information and such a unique perspective from his point of view of the world of history of experiences. And so I can't wait to let you guys get a glimpse of what I've been getting a glimpse of these past uh what about 2 or 3 years. I think he reached out to me. um I didn't even know him, but he knew I was an author, and he's an author, and he was telling me about some things that I posted about Goldsboro. So we developed a long distance relationship where we would share information. He sent me his books, I sent him my books, and we have been correlating and corresponding ever since. So whenever he gets in, you'll be able to to hear him. Um, man, maybe I should send him a message and tell him to go ahead and call now. Didn't think the introduction will be that long, but yeah, very interesting gentleman. Well, how's everybody doing tonight? Is everybody okay? Hope everybody is fine, man. Y'all give me a what's up in the comments while I'm waiting on my man Dink. And if he doesn't call in a few, it's definitely some subjects I would like to discuss. Okay, there he look like he's calling in from the wrong telephone. I think he made a mistake and called me. But hopefully he'll there he is. There he is. There he is. Hello.
Hey, Richard.
Hey, welcome, Dink. We've been waiting on you. Definitely. I'm glad
You're
you.
running around the house trying to get the phone charged up.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And
So
so
let's swing into it.
I gave the people a little bit of about our backstory. How you were
Yes.
you reached out to me. Welcome, Dink. Shamika Carmichael says you reached out to me, a couple of years back, and you saw a lot of the things I used to post about history and things, and I was telling the people how you would always give me these long, introspective, informative messages, that would give me different perspectives on things. So I just want to introduce you. This is Dink Bridgers, originally from Goldsboro, North Carolina. Now I think he stays in Utah, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Been here for
Utah.
30 years.
30 years. Okay. And so we're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
we're gonna jump right into it. Since I gave him a little bit of backstory. So you were born in Goldsboro, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Born and raised.
Okay. What year were you born?
1949.
1949. Okay. So
Yeah.
if you
And
guys
to put a little asterisk on that, the draft in Vietnam, I was, that's sort of the period of time when I blew up and went away. But the draft, the end of the draft in 1972, sort of freed me. And I was drafted, and I basically faked being crazy, and got in to see a shrink, and told the shrink, that I didn't want to kill anybody. And they said, "Well, we're just who you want. We want you." But I managed to. I had a psychologist at the University of North Carolina call me the day I was going to drive my motor scooter to Canada. I was going to drive a Honda 350 to Canada. I had my money in my pocket, ready to go, and a friend at a party ran into a man that I worked for at the University of North Carolina in the psychology department. I worked as a therapist at the university. I would talk people down on acid trips when they came in on the weekends. That was my job for 2 years, and I worked in a record store. And I got out of the draft by this guy calling me up at from a party in the middle of the night and telling me to come to his office. And so I went to the guy that hired me, his office, and he told me that he had written a letter that would get me in to see a shrink, and that my responsibility between that time, which was 2 days prior to my induction, that I would have to make myself crazy. So I took LSD, a lot of it, and I stayed up with coffee for 2 days. And when I got to the induction, it was quite a trip.
I can imagine.
It was, you're standing in an auditorium with everybody bending over in a circle with a guy walking around with a speculum. I mean, it's just completely absurd. Before I was to be inducted, I passed the physical, went to them, and there was a table next to before you walk in the left-hand side and you say the pledge and you go off to the Marines or the Army, or I was to give a note to that guy beside the door. Nobody even knows who the guy is unless the shrink tells you.
Okay.
And so I took it, to him, gave him the thing, and he got an appointment with a psychologist, and I managed to convince the psychologist that I was mentally unstable. And so they gave me 6 months, and then they started, in that period of time, they started the lottery system. And my lottery number was 217, magic number. They made it up to like 210 or something. Okay. And I just got out of the draft, and I immediately went to Europe.
Okay. And how old were you then?
I was 20. When I went to Europe, I was 24. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned during that time, I know, 1949, 59, 69, the 60s and the 70s, you mentioned, talking people off acid trips and those things like that. So you grew up in that era.
I grew up in that area, soaked in it.
You soaked in it. Okay.
Yeah, truly. It was, I don't know, people that would understand, this time that had grown up in this time, could all relate. All my friends. I ended up moving to San Francisco, living there. I raised my kids in San Francisco. We were there for 17 years.
Okay.
And then I started teaching. But in San Francisco, when I was in San Francisco, I ran into, I was doing filmmaking. So I was making videos of people's stories and, editing in strange ways. I have 2 fine art degrees, 2 MFA degrees, and both of them are in filmmaking. One of them's in painting, one painting and filmmaking.
Okay.
So I went into teaching right after I got out of school. And so that's how I kind of end up traveling around through my life. But in San Francisco, I did some pieces on the Vietnam War. And one of them was interviewing, I lived 2 blocks away from a vet center, probably the most horrific vet center in the country. It was right on Golden Gate Park. So a lot of the vets were homeless and they were sleeping in the park. And a lot of them were drunks just sleeping on the street. You'd pass them every day and you'd have a certain amount of money ready for them. There were certain people that I knew. And because I was into this documentation thing, I talked to everybody. And the word got out that I was making a film about the Vietnam War. And so they were coming to me to tell the stories. And so I made a bunch of videos of Vietnam stories. And that, to me, my generation is really Vietnam. It's not LSD.
Okay.
The LSD was given to us so that we put up with the war.
Oh,
I mean, that was a
wow.
CIA program. That was
That's
a
deep.
CIA program. Ken Kesey, a friend of mine, and his Merry Pranksters. I know 3 of the Merry Pranksters that were in the Ken Kesey's group. They had children that are my friends that call me up constantly, like from San Francisco. I get a lot of friends. Like one called me up yesterday, and they were raised on the pig farm. And if you can imagine what these people would, they gave the children acid. They had sex with the children. That's what they did. And my friends that went through this, most of them won't believe when I tell them that was a CIA program. But my dearest friends there all know that we're in it, understanding, and are now at this point they're very upset about it. And we lost one 2 years ago, a fellow named Michael. His father was Michael Bowen. And Michael Bowen was famous for starting an organization, an event where we all go to the Pentagon. It's 1967, I think it was. And we tried to raise it, levitate it. That was the event. We're all going to go. And it was a huge event, really amazing thing. So he did that. But he also created this young boy, Rama, in the pig farm. And Rama never saw his dad much. His given name was after his father, but everybody called him Rama.
Okay.
And Rama is a portrait of what happened that didn't happen in Vietnam, a result of Vietnam.
Okay.
Rama became an alcoholic, went into a skinhead gang, became a killer. I had a band in San Francisco. And the reason I'm sort of known in San Francisco is from my band. It was a very counterculture band called Minesweeper.
Okay.
And these people like Rama, who I knew from living in the Haight-Ashbury, I raised my kids in the Haight-Ashbury. I knew him from the Haight-Ashbury and all these other kids from the pig farm and people who had been in various bands and famous bands. And Rama, I think, is probably the perfect example of what Vietnam did to people. He didn't go to Vietnam, but he was part of the program that the mind control program.
Okay.
That kept us all in the war. It distracted the kids. They gave the Grateful Dead. I'll give you. Here's a real good example of what was going on then. There were 2 bands from the San Francisco Bay Area that were the psychedelic bands. One was the Grateful Dead. They were originally called the Warlocks.
Okay.
The other band was the Charlatans, and they were the original. Think of the name, the Charlatans. We are not what we appear to be. The Dead were called the Warlocks. And when that didn't work so good, and people thought that was a little bit too obvious, because that's really what it is, black magic, is they renamed themselves the Grateful Dead. Now, the founder of the Charlatans, who's the original psychedelic band, born and raised in the military, came out of the military, was put into this situation in San Francisco by coming up from Los Angeles. And he was given enough money and whatever it takes to start a really nice rock band. He was a pretty good guitar player. He'd studied, his father supported his work. His father was a career military. As you'll notice, if you ever look into the backgrounds, a lot of rock stars, their families are military. Frank Zappa's father was Francis Zappa, who was a famous chemist. He studied at the University of North Carolina and taught chemistry at the University of North Carolina before he went to the Edgewood Arsenal, where he designed drugs for warfare and how to disperse drugs for warfare. One of those drugs was LSD. Another one was STP, BZ, a list a mile long of things that they were using. And they were experimenting on people, black people, actually, black prisoners. black prisoners in prison.
I remember that. I think I read
Right,
up on
and
that
that's
too.
That's Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa was a friend of mine.
Exactly.
Frank Zappa came to my shows. He loved my band. But nobody would allow me to influence Frank. Frank, had been through this already, and we didn't ever talk about it. This is not something Frank and I talked about. We talked about his family and music, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I looked into his family later on, I realized that Frank was basically a CIA plant. The band was created. I mean, when you have a band that doesn't have a hit record, what you have is a hobby.
Uh-huh.
Right? And he managed to make a lot of very expensive albums. So because he was backed. And his music influenced me. In a way, I'm sure that I'm not even aware of how it influenced me as far as the war goes or any of that stuff. But he was an influencer. And so that's what's happening in Northern California. And I end up there at the tail end of it. And I meet Michael, who had a record store just 2 blocks away from me. And he ended up, I met him and traded records with him and knew him really well, and a nice guy. And he never once said he was the founder of the Charlatans. And then he started another band, and he played with my band, played with his band all over the city, and they're still happening. He died recently, but his band, the Flaming Groovies, is still a really good San Francisco band. But I learned from all this stuff dealing with Vietnam that my generation was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Destroyed.
And
drugs.
We coming up on our first break, Dink. But when we come back, because you brought up a subject of the mind control and the drugs and everything, I remember you told me about Laurel Canyon. So when we come back, I want you to give the people that. We'll be right back. 106.9 Awesome Radio.
Don't trust the TV depictions. This is Ken Ham, editor of the expose Glasshouse, Shattering the Myth of Evolution. If you ask someone to describe a caveman, they'd probably use words like unintelligent or less evolved. You see, most people's view of cavemen comes from TV programs that depict so-called cavemen as dumb, hunchback brutes who can only grunt a few syllables. But that picture is a lie. We know now that these people who lived in caves made musical instruments and tools, wore jewelry and makeup, heated their cave homes, and even used a lunar calendar. Don't get your view of our ancestors from the media. Look to God's word, which tells us all people are descended from Adam and Eve and made in God's image.
Discover answers to combat evolutionary teaching when you visit AnswersRadio.com and listen to this program again and many others when you go to AnswersRadio.com.
Dr. Gary Chapman with a Love Language Minute.
Many people view marriage as a contract. I'll do this if you'll do that. The Bible views marriage as a covenant. I will look out for your well-being no matter how you treat me. I view our marriage as a permanent relationship. I will not walk out on you. Because I love you, I will confront you when I see you doing things that I believe are harmful. I will speak the truth in love. When you confess wrongdoing, I will forgive you and never hold it against you in the future. I am committed to helping you accomplish God's will for your life. You can count on my support. Where does one get the heart and the power to live out such a covenant? I know of only one source, God. He is a covenant-keeping God and will help you keep your covenant.
Dr. Gary Chapman is the author of The 5 Love Languages. For more, visit 5lovelanguages.com.
Lord, I hope this ain't your plan for me to die up in these streets. Oh, Lord, can you help me?
And we are back to the U-Turn Show, 106.9 Awesome Radio. I'm your host, Richard Taylor, with a very special guest, Mr. Dink Bridgers, a man full of historic information. Just a quick comment, Dink. Shamika Carmichael says, I looked you up on Facebook and see you have done a lot of traveling around the world. You're an awesome dude and very interesting story you have. Thanks, Richard, for giving us a different vibe this week. Definitely, she doesn't even know the half, but I definitely don't want to get right back into it, because you mentioned something about, the music and Frank Zappa and how he was back, and he wasn't very good, but he was back and had a lot of influence, and that's what I see today.
He was really good, but he was not commercial in the least.
Okay. But I just noticed how, once again, a lot of musicians are back this days to push an agenda, or propagate certain things, and, kind of control the minds of the youth. So let's jump into Laurel Canyon. I know, you gave me some information about Laurel Canyon.
Well, that dovetails with Frank Zappa, because Frank Zappa owned a house in Laurel Canyon, right down at the mouth of the canyon. It was Tom Mix's cabin. It was called the log cabin. It's not a log cabin. It's like 3-4 stories, has its own tree house that's a house, has a basement with this, with a bowling alley, and with these little rooms around the outside. And the CIA had taken over this building before Frank got it. They had come into the building to run these different hippie things. It was right at the beginning of the drugs being dispersed. So they had, they created clubs on the strip. Got Victoris Kovinskis. It's not Kovinskis. I can't remember his name right now.
Okay.
I'll have to look it up. I've got the thing. But he basically started he was an artist and a sculptor, and he was working with the CIA, who gave him drugs when the first things came out, and he was actually recruiting street girls. There was a lot of runaways happening in the mid '60s. Lots of kids running away from home, and going to LA. And he turned Tom Mix's house basically into a child prostitution ring. And but they created the bands in that basement in Frank Zappa's house. That was actually a place where they all, all these coincidences of these bands all showing up in the same place. The Doors, Jimi Hendrix, even.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those bands, most of those, all of them, just about. And then the Northern California thing was happening at the same time. But the LA one really took off because they had the Strip.
Okay.
So they used the Strip to promote the bands, and they rehearsed the bands in a basement in the cabin. And I think there was a couple of other sites there in the canyon as well. There are tunnels from the houses to other houses in the canyon. Very spooky. But it's that's where the eggs hatched. A good example is the Doors. The Doors basically did not know how to play their instruments.
Mm-hmm.
Their music was written for them, but they were taken into the basement, and people, I tell them about this, and they go, "Oh, Jim Morrison, oh, he's so wonderful." Well, yeah, he practiced on high performance drugs for years before they even let him out. I mean, and they gave them all the girls they wanted. They built their self-esteem by giving them all this stuff, and they kept giving them performance-enhancing drugs constantly, psychedelics and all other kinds of things, experimental drugs, because it's just the start of the thing, and everything's legal, So, so they're creating these bands in the basement. The Doors were one of them. The Byrds were one of them. What was one? It's just endless. If you can think of a band from the '60s from LA that's in that same period of time, they were CIA backed. You can bet it, because it wasn't really happening until the backing. So they created these clubs, and they had all these child prostitutes, basically. They're little girls with high on LSD running around dancing. You've seen pictures of them,
mm-hmm.
the dancers at the Grateful Dead concert reminded me of that. I used to work for the Grateful Dead, and I'd go to their I hated their music, but I did their instruments. I worked on their guitars, and so I would go and watch their shows, and you could push people out of the way with a light bulb, and with a beam of light. You can point it at them, they'll get out of the way. That's the kind of audience they were. They're all completely high, LSD always. Too much of it, and but.
And you mentioned Jim Morrison. You mentioned Jim Morrison. Wasn't his father like a high level military guy or something?
Jim Morrison my father was the commander of the Pacific Fleet during the Vietnam War. He was the instigator of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Jim Morrison was with him on the boat when he was in South Vietnam. Jim Morrison, the kid, was with him on the boat. There's pictures of him on the boat with his dad. And that's just and Frank Zappa. His dad is a chemist making chemical weapons. And his job was how to disperse them.
So why did all their kids get involved in, the drugs and the bands?
Because they were basically the kids were real well off kids from the military. So they're military families. And the military families just basically are like it. And I think
hold that thought, Dink. We got to take our last break, but we're going to be right back. 106.9. Don't forget where we're at. 106.9. Awesome Radio.
When it comes to politics and the law, it seems the key word is insubstantial. Stay tuned. You'll need to know this.
With another critical legal issue for your church or ministry, here's attorney David Gibbs Jr. with today's Legal Alert.
We recently received an inquiry from a church in Virginia. Their primary mission was to spread the message of the gospel and to help people in need. But they also wanted to do what they could in the political realm. They needed answers. What would the church be allowed to do? So they contacted us at the Christian Law Association. Our attorneys provided them with detailed resources and reminded them that the church could only be involved to an insubstantial degree. Let me repeat that. The church could only be involved to an insubstantial degree. In practical terms, the IRS still uses the 5% rule. Let me tell you what it says. No more than 5% of the church's time or financial resources can be used in the political arena without jeopardizing the church's tax-exempt status. Insubstantial, the court says, will be allowed, but over 5%, you can lose your tax-exempt status. Be careful if you're involved in politics.
The Legal Alert is a presentation of this station and the Christian Law Association.
Do you need community volunteer hours? If so, then Awesome Radio is an excellent organization to volunteer with. We are seeking self-motivated individuals. You just might discover a new career in broadcast radio. Current openings for volunteer positions: engineer, voiceover, community events, must have integrity, must not smoke, drink, inhale, or take any such controlled substances while on the premises and while representing Awesome Radio in any capacity. Must have flexibility of days and times. Must have valid driver's license. Must have own transportation. For more detailed information, 252-756-3137. If you would like to join our family team here at Awesome Radio, the number to reach us, 252-756-3137. 252-756-3137. Yeah. Can you hear us? Can you feel us? Awesome Radio.
Living through the wire. I'm living through the fire. Can you save me?
Some days I wonder how I've made it this far. Then I remember. I'm Lena Ebijamra, and this is Today's Single Christian. I've been around quite a bit in my life. I grew up in Beirut, Lebanon, when the Civil War was at its height. We later moved to Wisconsin, and I became a pediatric ER doctor. I've lived in Chicago practicing medicine the last 20 years and running a ministry that does a whole lot of things, including medical work with Syrian refugees back in my home country. Some people wonder how I've made it so far. The road has been hard at times, and the disappointments abundant. I often wonder how I've made it this far. But the answer is simple. Jesus is the only reason I've made it this far. His love saved me. His grace sustains me. His power protects me. And His word guides me. Do you know this Jesus? Are you trusting Him day after glorious day? If not, you can put your trust in Him today. And if you do, send me an email and share your story at lena@todaysinglepchristian.com.
And we are back, 106.9 Awesome Radio, the U-Turn Show. I'm your host, Richard Taylor, with a very special, knowledgeable guest, Dink Bridgers. And I do want to shout out my brother-in-law, Troy McAdams. What up, fam? How you doing? He's listening in. And when we left, we were talking about, Jim Morrison and Frank Zappa, the children of these well-to-do, high-level military and, government people.
Yeah.
Very influential people being involved. Like, do you think they were placed there or they were put there by their parents, or it was an act of rebellion on their part?
Yeah, definitely put there by their parents, sent there by their parents. Can you imagine though that they tried to create this aura of the star already, so that they were. That's why they were so comfortable on stage. They'd been rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, and given drugs and drugs and drugs and women and women and women. And so that's how they were able to actually do it. I mean, it takes a lot of rehearsal to create a band like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did it myself, and it is years of rehearsal and hard work, and really hard work and dedication. And so I know that dedication was there, and is enhanced by the drugs, enhanced by the lifestyle. And it started in Los Angeles and San Francisco at the same time. I went to San Francisco in 1967. So, I got a little glimpse of that. I went to the LA first, but I went to San Francisco because, that's where you had to go. And I had a girlfriend there. I had a friend from Goldsboro High School that moved to Marin. Now, a lot of this stuff that I know, that I have gathered, is because I'm from Goldsboro. I was in the Civil Air Patrol when I was a kid, and that was military intelligence. And I was in it for the full program until they got really kind of sadistic on me, and I ran. I just ran. I was with them for almost 4 years. And so I had an idea of the effect of the military, and I was in the Civil Air Patrol. So was Lee Harvey Oswald, and I felt that indoctrination. I witnessed it. I mean, it was brutal too. At some point, it was physical. It was intimidating. They used young whippersnapper Air Force guys who were really hardcore to just drive us like we were in the Marine Corps. It was, so that's my indoctrination. I wanted to fly an airplane. Frankly, that's what I wanted. I wanted to learn how to fly an airplane, and my dad promised me an airplane and the whole 9 yards, and I went through that and just realized that I never wanted to be in the military. So I think I was really lucky to have had that negative thing from the Civil Air Patrol at that time. But that's all that revolution that happened, after that, the Kennedy assassination and the roll towards war is a lot bigger than just Jim Morrison and Frank Zappa. And my generation of mind control, the mind control that affected me and my generation. I have a lot of friends, and I'm an artist too, so I have this connection with the psychedelic artist community. And I tell them this stuff about Frank Zappa and the CIA, and they just are frightened by it because they've invested their entire lives in psychedelic art and the music. And they just can't give it up, and they can't give up. And so that's part of the effect of the mind control, is that you can't stop it because it's your world. It surrounds you. It's what makes your world happy. And so I have a couple of really good friends who did that really beautiful psychedelic art you saw on the posters in San Francisco. I know those guys, and and maybe one or two of them would sit down and entertain this. But I'm sure that I know at least two of one. One is who is a really close friend. I know it would give him a nervous breakdown if he really, really accepted this. If he really accepted that the words that we were using to define our culture were coming from Nazis, were coming from books written by Nazis. It is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. That's the description of the rise of Hitler in a book, German book. That's so. All the lies that they gave us that were so enticing, that we've lived for so long, are now starting to kind of rot, and they're falling off in little branches. Now, one of the things I have to say is David McGowan. I have to promote his book. I'm writing a book about David McGowan's murder.
Oh, so he was murdered. David McGowan is the one that wrote like the something of Laurel Canyon, right?
There's a weird scenes inside the canyon.
Okay, and he wrote that book.
If you want to read anything about the hippie era, read that book, because it really has the insight from years past of someone who really was brilliant, who really just looked at it and went, something's going on here.
Okay.
And really studied it. He lived in LA. He was murdered. I know who his murderer is. It's really frightening to have all this information and be threatened with it. And but Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, read it. He died for it. He did it. He died for that book. He reveals everything.
I read a little bit of it. I read a little because it's so detailed. It's
very detailed, especially in the lives of the stars and things like that. So you get those details. I already knew Frank from years. Frank was a friend of mine. I loved Frank, and we were sabotaged by a person in the military, by a person whose father was in military intelligence. He was my best friend for years, and he sabotaged me. He even told me, he admitted to it. He told me he did it. That's how close a friend he was. After all those years, he looks back on it now and he feels ashamed of it, and he tells me about it. So he opened the door for me. He was my saboteur. At the same time, he was also shining a light for me. At one point I loved him, and then I hated him. And now I look back on the thing that he revealed to me, and it wasn't my fault. It was nothing I did that sabotaged my band. My band was sabotaged by him, and he admitted to it. He owned the studio I used. The big studio the Grateful Dead recorded. It's the he actually tried to sabotage Green Day. And they had some other money backing behind him, but I didn't have money backing behind me. All I had was me and my resources alone with my family, working my tail off like crazy for years to get the band off and around. I had some really good people that I was working with, and I tell them the same stories, and they don't want to believe them either. One of my bass player was the bass player for It's a Beautiful Day. If you ever want to listen to some really amazingly beautiful music, listen to It's a Beautiful Day and know that it took 72 takes to do just one song. And every time they recorded the song, they used a new roll of gigantic 2-inch tape that costs hundreds of dollars. And that's a hippie band. So they were backed by the CIA also, but the guy that was in my band that played bass for me, that was in that band, refuses to think along those lines. When he writes a book, he writes about an acid trip he had in the park, and it's all about fairies and stuff. But the reality of his life in the music business was that he was taken up when he was 16 years old from a military family and put into this band, and they made him rehearse over and over and over again in Los Angeles. This is my own bass player from my band, Mitchell Holman. And he, you can't even talk to this about this. It's just a mental block a mile wide for him to understand that where he came from and all that money came from somewhere For what? You know, did they know you were going to have big hits? Yeah, they do. They were going to have big hits because they took, you know, a couple of years to make the album. And they're doing songs and doing 72 takes of a song and throwing the tape away every time. Because if you turn the volume really loud on a master, on a tape, when you're recording it, all the instruments, you take it to its max. And there's a certain kind of punch that happens with the magnetic tape when you record it at a super high volume. But then you can't erase it because it leaves some of the bigger artifacts in it, like a really loud note will come through again. It will never be able to be erased. So they would use tape over and over again. But to me, when he told me how many takes and how long it took to make that album, and at how he was barely able to play the bass when he started, it just kind of like, yeah, he was part of it, and he didn't even know it.
And the
military family.
Didn't the Manson thing happen in Laurel Canyon too?
There's a big. We're running into a big thing here because I'm writing a book about the murder of David McGowan. Okay? I know who killed him, and I'm walking on eggs all the time. I know the lawyer who is from Goldsboro. The lawyer for this gigantic, well, I'll go ahead and say it. It's the Church of Scientology.
Okay.
It's not the church, the main church, but their lawyer is from Goldsboro. I grew up with him. And he called me up and told me, don't mess with these people. But I'm not messing with them. I'm messing with an offshoot of the Church of Scientology. That's Charles Manson.
Okay.
That's the process. The process is witchcraft. And I was in the music business long enough to run into a coven. So I know that, that stuff really does happen, and that stuff really works in a realm of their world. I mean, they can really poison you,
Yeah.
They can, and some of them can remote kill you because there is a remote killing ceremony. I've been studying it for 40 years. I'm adopted Navajo to be able to get next to that information, and there's so much there in that. Charlie Manson hole is deep because Charlie Manson. You've heard of the way the Church of Scientology works with this certain process that you do, the process where you sit down in front of a machine and you have to say certain things, and they're emotional, and you have to balance the output of your certain brain waves so it stays in a certain place when you say that one thing. And if you can do that through this whole list of things, you're considered clear.
Okay.
And that's what a lot of the Scientologists want to be, is they want to be clear. Charlie Manson was clear. He was part of that first series of this stuff, and there were a lot of probably other serial killers that were clear too, but he was definitely part of that of the process. David McGowan, the fellow who wrote the book on the music industry and the CIA and the drugs, David didn't believe in God. That's his biggest flaw. His brother is my information. His brother gives me the whole story. I know all about his family. I'm constantly in contact with them, and his brother has been diagnosed with cancer. So we think he was poisoned as well. But David was poisoned, and I have the description of the whole event and everything, and I've given it to the poisoners. And I'm sitting back waiting to see what happens. If I disappear, look, try to find my manuscripts.
Okay. Well, listen. With everything that you ran into, and we just barely scratched the surface. We got about 6 more minutes, so I'm definitely going to have to have you on again, Dink, because we will. We can get back into this. I'd really love to get back into that one, a specific subject in that range. You know what I mean? Okay, but
what?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I do have a lot of stuff that's written,
Yeah, and
so that is not published, and and I could actually read from a manuscript at some point and really,
yeah, and I
have
got
it
and I
nailed.
didn't even
And
take the
so,
time to read that document you sent me a long time ago.
well, don't. I'll send you a new one. It's called Appearances. It's about black and white relations in Goldsboro, North Carolina. It's about my, encounters with black people as I was growing up. And it's about, the maids I had. My dad put me on a crew of all black guys from when I was 12 until I was 18. I worked with a crew of all black guys. I was the only white guy on the crew. And I wouldn't trade that for anything.
You learned a lot, huh?
I learned a whole lot.
Yeah, we didn't even
I
scratch
learned
that surface right there. But
Yeah, exactly.
the considering everything that you learned and you went through and you saw and you witnessed, is that why you took the route that you've taken later on life to to go out to the Midwest and just ride bikes and live in the mountains, and did
Well,
that have some?
that's another story. I was
Oh.
I was teaching film, traveling across the country. I went to North Carolina and started a film school in Castle County. And it turns out that the guy I was working for was selling heroin. He'd gotten his doctorate in prison, and he was a gangster. And I just ran. And I taught in Colorado. I ran a film school in Colorado, so I went back through there, and we always vacationed in Moab. So I just stopped my family in Moab and just went and found a friend because I've been shooting movies out there. And I found a friend that helped me in the movie industry, gave me a place to stay. And the Moab post office lost my curriculum vitae, my resume, my $7,000 resume is a big book with all of the documentation of my films and stuff in it. And they misplaced it, and I missed the job that I had in California, in Marin County. I was going to start a film school at the College of Marin, and if these jobs, and I had all my friends were on the hiring committee. I had it, you know what I mean, but you can't miss the deadline on your materials. And it's just
Did you ever find your resume? Did you ever get it back?
Yeah, I found it a month later. I went back into the post office, and I knew a really nice guy that was working in there. I said, "Man, can we go look around the place if we can find it?" Guess where it was?
What was it?
It was underneath the cash register at the front desk. It was just right there.
So must have not meant for you to.
Exactly, and I'm glad I'm not in California. And I was blessed to just be dumped here. I mean, you have to come visit.
Yeah, I see the view. I see the pictures that you take, and
it's incredibly beautiful out here. It is a tourist town now. When I moved here, it was a funky cowboy town with a lot of crazy, rednecks and Native Americans and Mexicans, and one black guy. I'm here because of one. I'm here because of one black guy. Because the first time I came here, I saw a friend of mine from San Francisco standing on the street, the only black guy in town.
Oh wow!
I'm telling you, if you've read any of my stories, just black guys show up like you in my life. It's just, some of my best friends are black, and it's not like I chose that. You know what I mean? It just happened, and it's wonderful. But it's all the pivotal people in my life seem to be black.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've forever read Pussycat Dancer is the story I wrote in my first book about the stripper, the black stripper.
Oh yeah. I read
the Wayne
that.
County Fair.
Yeah.
I found them all. I found them all after writing about them.
And we didn't even get into the Amsterdam, your time in Europe.
Oh,
so,
and Amsterdam, I was in the Black Mafia in Amsterdam. Believe that or not. I really was. I had an African handler. Really, I loved him. He was like my dad. He killed people in front of me.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that serious, but at the same time, it's kind of like the Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, you love your captain.
He came on to me really hard and very threatening, and I just gave love in return.
Mm-hmm.
I really did, and it just flowered. His family took me in. So it was not like, it wasn't a bad thing. It was a bad thing for other people involved because in Amsterdam, one of the things that happens in Amsterdam is there was a real racist program to get rid of as many Surinamers, brown, black people as possible in a very, very weird way. And I feel like Solomon was used.
Okay, we got about 15 seconds, but I do want to say thank you. Thank you for all of our Facebook listeners and the radio listeners who tune in today. Tune in next week. But we're definitely going to have Mr. Bridgers back. You've been listening to 106.9 Awesome Radio.
Lord, I need you to smile on me. Lord, I'm pleading. Tell me where you want me to go. I want to be right with you. Oh, and oh, Lord, I'm tired of going.
Yeah, we had since he was on the call, since he was on the radio, he's gone now. But yeah, very, very interesting man, man. I like talking to him. I got about 2 of his books, and that just reinvigorated for me to get back into his books because some of the things that he talks about people wouldn't believe, and that's why people. I don't look at the world as other people look at it because I know certain things that have went on behind the scenes. I study these things and, speaking to someone who's been around those things and can confirm those things, just lets me know that, this world is not what we see sometimes. And, it's been put together by, very, very sinister, very powerful, very calculating people to give us this illusion of, certain aspects or certain perceptions that we have. And those perceptions have been manufactured or, as people probably can understand, socially engineered to, once again, control the minds of the masses. So I'm very thankful for people like, Mr. Bridgers who can, relate to, people who look deeper beyond what things appear. So I thank y'all for tuning in. We're gonna have them back, but we barely scratched the surface on some of the things me and this guy, talk about. But I thank y'all for tuning in. But next week we're gonna have Miss Michelle Bryant, and we're gonna be talking about the Health and Wellness Fair that's gonna be held on July the 8th at the Herman Park Health and Wellness Seminar event. We're going to have a lot of resources out there for people for all sorts of, for every aspect of life, whether it's health, financial, mental health, everything. So I thank everybody for tuning in, and y'all have a good night. Thanks everyone for listening. Peace and blessings.